I sat frozen as my brother's wife smirked across the dinner table and said, "Aletta, when we move into your duplex, I want the master bedroom renovated. It's only fair since we'll be living there long term." Everyone laughed like it was already decided. My parents nodded, as if my hard work, my mortgage, my blood and sweat meant nothing. The room started spinning. This dinner was supposed to celebrate my promotion, not announce the theft of my property. 5 years of sacrifices, working 3 jobs, saving every penny, and now they expected me to hand over my dream home for free. Their entitled smiles made my stomach turn. "Excuse me?" I managed to say, my voice barely audible over the clinking of silverware. "Oh, don't act surprised," Tiffany continued, cutting into her steak. "We've been planning this for months." Months. The word echoed in my head as I glanced around the table. My brother Scott sat there grinning, nodding along with his wife. My parents beamed with pride, as if they'd orchestrated some wonderful surprise instead of an ambush. "Planning what exactly?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother reached across and patted my hand. "Sweetheart, we know how much you struggle with that big duplex all by yourself. Scott and Tiffany need a place, and this way, everyone wins. Everyone except me. I'm 34 years old, single, independent. For years, I worked as an accountant by day and bartended nights and weekends to save for my down payment. 2 years ago, I finally bought my duplex in a modest but up-and-coming neighborhood. I live in one unit and rent out the other to cover most of my mortgage. I spent weekends tearing out old carpet, painting walls, and installing new fixtures to make it livable. My hands still bear the scars from renovation work. Meanwhile, Scott and Tiffany, both 30, had lived with my parents' rent, free since they got married 6 years ago. Scott bounced between jobs, never keeping one longer than a few months because the boss was unfair or the work was beneath him. Tiffany stayed home with their 2 children, 4-year-old Jackson and 2-year-old Emma. They contributed nothing to my parents' household expenses. It wasn't that I didn't love my niece and nephew, but watching my parents drain their retirement accounts to support my brother's family while I worked myself to exhaustion was a bitter pill to swallow. "I don't understand," I said carefully. "Are you talking about renting the second unit when my current tenant leaves? At least that would make some sense, though the thought of my brother as a tenant made me nervous." My father chuckled. No. You'd move all your things to the smaller unit and Scott's family would take the main unit. They need the space with the kids." I nearly choked on my water. "You want me to give up my home? The one I renovated myself?" "It's not giving up," my mother corrected. "You'd still be in the building. And family helps family. Besides," Scott added, "it's not like you have a family to fill all that space." The dinner continued with everyone discussing my property as if I had no say in the matter. Tiffany listed all the changes she wanted to make to my carefully designed home. New paint colors, different flooring, knocking out a wall to create a larger playroom. I barely touched my food, my appetite gone. As everyone moved to dessert, I excused myself to use the restroom. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to process what was happening. When I returned, I heard Scott mention something about a key. "What key?" I asked. An awkward silence fell over the table. "Well," my mother began hesitantly, "we gave Scott your spare key so he could show the rental unit to some potential subletters." "You did what?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Don't overreact," Scott said. "We found a great couple willing to pay $50 more per month than your current tenant. That's extra money in your pocket." "In my pocket?" I repeated. "Or in yours?" Scott and Tiffany exchanged glances. "Well," Tiffany said slowly, "we thought since we'd be taking over management of the property, we'd keep the rental income. It's only fair since we'll be living there and handling any issues." I felt like I was in a nightmare. They wanted my home, my rental income, and expected me to move into the smaller unit, all while paying the mortgage entirely by myself. "When exactly were you planning to tell me about all this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "We're telling you now," Scott said, as if he was doing me a favor. "We need to move in next month. Mom and Dad are turning our rooms into a home office." My phone buzzed with a text. I glanced down to see a message from Carol, my tenant of 18 months, a retired teacher who paid her rent on time and never complained, even when repairs were needed. "Is everything okay, Aletta?" she wrote. "A couple just showed up claiming to be the new owner's family. They're inside my unit right now, measuring and taking pictures. My cat is terrified." Attached were photos of Scott and Tiffany inside Carol's apartment. In one picture, Tiffany was opening kitchen cabinets. In another, Scott was measuring the living room wall. "You broke into my tenant's apartment?" I held up my phone so they could see the pictures. "That's illegal. You can't just enter someone's home without permission." "We didn't break in," my father said defensively. "We used the key, and we called first." "Called who?" "Not Carol, and certainly not me." "We left a voicemail," Tiffany said dismissively. "Not our fault if she didn't check it. Anyway, we needed to see how our furniture would fit." I stood up, gathering my purse. "This dinner is over. I'm going to check on my tenant and make sure she's okay. Then we'll talk about this when everyone has calmed down." "Don't be dramatic," my mother said. "Sit down and finish your dessert." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm protecting my property and my tenant's rights." As I drove to my duplex, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. How could my family do this to me? How could they make such enormous plans involving my biggest investment without even asking me? When I arrived, Carol was sitting on her front step, visibly upset. "I'm so sorry," I said, sitting beside her. "I had no idea they were coming. They rearranged my furniture," Aletta said it would look better that way. "And they scared Muffin so badly she's been hiding under the bed for hours." I felt sick with embarrassment. "I'll make this right. They had no permission to be here. They said I needed to be out by the end of the month, that their family was moving in." Carol's voice trembled. "I've been looking at apartments all evening. Everything's so much more expensive now." "You don't need to move," I assured her. "Your lease runs through December. No one's kicking you out." But the damage was done. Carol no longer felt safe in her home, and I no longer felt in control of my own property. The following Saturday, I sat across from my parents at their kitchen table, legal papers spread out before me. After the disastrous dinner, I'd consulted with my friend Jenna, a real estate attorney. She'd been horrified by my family's presumption and had helped me draft a formal letter clarifying ownership and access rights to my property. "What's all this?" my father asked, frowning at the documents. "This is a formal notice that the spare key you gave to Scott has been unauthorized and must be returned immediately," I explained, keeping my voice level despite my churning emotions. "And this is a reminder that all property decisions, including tenant arrangements and renovations, must go through me as the legal owner." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I can't believe you're bringing lawyers into a family matter." "I didn't want to," I said. "But after what happened with Carol, I need to be clear about boundaries." "Boundaries?" my father repeated, his face reddening. "Is that how you think of family? As people you need boundaries from?" I took a deep breath. "When family members enter my tenant's home without permission and tell her she has to move out, yes, boundaries are needed." "We were trying to help," my mother insisted. "Scott and Tiffany need stability. Those children need a permanent home." "I understand that, but my duplex isn't the solution. I worked for years to afford that property. The rental income is how I pay my mortgage." "So you'll put money above family?" My father's voice rose. "Your brother needs help, Aletta. And where was this concern when I was working 3 jobs to save for my down payment? Where was family then?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "That was different," my mother finally said. "You've always been the independent one. Scott struggles more." The familiar refrain. Scott needs more help. Scott has a harder time. Scott can't be expected to manage on his own. "You know, we've already told Carol she needs to leave by the end of next month," my father said casually. I stared at him in disbelief. "You have no right to do that. She has a lease." "Family emergency trumps a lease," he replied, as if stating an obvious fact. We explained the situation to her. "There is no family emergency." I tried to keep my voice down, and even if there was, it wouldn't invalidate a legal contract. My mother reached for my hand. "Aletta, remember when you lived here during college? We supported you then." "I paid rent," I reminded her. "I contributed to groceries. I worked part-time through school." "Still," she continued, "family helps family. That's what we've always taught you." Before I could respond, the front door opened, and Scott and Tiffany walked in with their children. Jackson ran to his grandparents for hugs while Emma toddled behind. "Oh, good. You're all here," Tiffany said, settling into a chair without being invited. "We need to discuss the renovation budget." I felt ambushed again. There is no renovation budget because there is no renovation happening. Tiffany's smile faltered. "But we've already given notice at our jobs. We can't back out now." "What?" This was the first I'd heard of any job changes. "Based on the new living arrangement," Scott explained, as if talking to a child. "I found a part-time position closer to your duplex. The commute from here would be impossible. And I've applied to the daycare 2 blocks from there," Tiffany added. "They'll take Emma for free if I work 15 hours a week." My head was spinning. They'd rearranged their entire lives based on a plan no one had confirmed with me. "This has gone too far," I said firmly. "I never agreed to any of this." "You're being selfish," my mother said, her voice hard. "After all we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked, immediately regretting my sharp tone. My father stood, his chair scraping across the floor. "We raised you, put a roof over your head, paid for your first year of college before you got that scholarship, and I'm grateful for that. But it doesn't entitle you to my property." "What about the money from Grandma and Grandpa?" Tiffany interjected. I turned to her, confused. "What money?" A heavy silence fell over the room. My parents exchanged nervous glances. "She doesn't know?" Scott asked them. "Know what?" I demanded. My mother sighed. "Your grandparents left money for both you and Scott. Equal amounts." "I never received any inheritance," I said slowly, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. "Because Scott needed it more," my father explained. "For the wedding, for when Jackson was born, for their car payment, when they fell behind." The betrayal cut deep. "So you gave him my inheritance too? Without telling me?" "We were planning to make it up to you," my mother said weakly. "How? By taking my home too?" I stood up, gathering the legal documents. "I need to go." "Don't be dramatic," Scott said. "Just help us this one time and we'll be fine." "One time?" I laughed bitterly. "You've been taking and taking for years. When does it end?" I left with the sound of my mother's sobs following me to the car. The drive home was a blur of tears and anger. When I arrived, I found another text from Carol. "Someone named Scott has been showing my apartment to strangers again. He's telling them he's the co-owner and accepting deposits. I'm sorry, but I need to give my 30-day notice. I don't feel comfortable anymore." Attached was a picture of a hand-written receipt. "Deposit for 451 Maple Street, Unit B paid to Scott Lawson, co-owner." My brother was collecting money for an apartment he didn't own. This wasn't just boundary crossing anymore. This was fraud. The following week was a nightmare of damage control. I changed the locks on both units of my duplex and installed a basic security camera at my front door. I refunded the deposit Scott had illegally collected and apologized profusely to the couple he had misled. I helped Carol find a new apartment, even covering her moving costs out of guilt. And I tried to ignore the barrage of calls and texts from my family, all expressing various levels of disappointment in me. "We need to talk," Scott's voice message said. "You're putting us in an impossible position." The kids were excited about their new rooms. "I can't believe you'd let your brother's family end up homeless," my mother texted. "We raised you better than this." I finally agreed to meet Scott and Tiffany at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where I hoped we could have a rational conversation. When I arrived, they were already seated, expressions grim. "Thanks for coming," I said, sliding into the booth across from them. "Not like we had a choice," Tiffany replied. "Since you've decided to destroy our plans." I took a deep breath. I didn't destroy anything, because there was never a plan I agreed to. You can't make life-changing decisions about my property without consulting me. "We thought Mom and Dad had already worked it out with you," Scott said, though his shifting gaze suggested he knew better. "Well, they hadn't. And now I've lost a reliable tenant, damaged my professional reputation in the neighborhood, and have to find a new renter." I tried to keep the conversation factual rather than emotional. "Not to mention the illegal collection of deposits." "That was a misunderstanding," Scott muttered. "You called yourself the co-owner. That's fraud, Scott." Tiffany leaned forward. "Look, we've already given notice at our current jobs. We've enrolled Jackson in the preschool near your duplex. We need a solution." I understand you're in a difficult position, but that position is of your own making. I can help you look for affordable rentals in the area." Scott laughed bitterly. "On what we make? In this market? There's nothing out there we can afford." "Then maybe you should have secured housing before quitting your jobs," I suggested. "We thought we had secured housing." Tiffany's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. "Your parents promised us." "It wasn't theirs to promise." I stirred my untouched coffee. "Have you looked into housing assistance programs? There are options for families with young children." Scott's face darkened. "We don't take handouts." I nearly choked on the irony. "Except from family?" "That's different," Tiffany said. "Family helps family." The familiar refrain again. But only in one direction, apparently. "Maybe your parents could help with a security deposit on a rental," I suggested. Tiffany and Scott exchanged glances. "They've been helping us with our credit card payments," Scott admitted. "They don't have much extra right now." "They said they were going to help us with bills until we got settled," Tiffany added, "using the money from your grandparents." I felt another wave of betrayal. "So not only did they give you my inheritance in the past, they're planning to keep doing it?" Scott at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" "Because, from where I'm sitting, it looks like everyone decided I would solve all the family's problems. My home, my income, my inheritance. What's next? My retirement account?" "You're being dramatic," Tiffany said dismissively. "It's not like you need all that space anyway. You're always working. And it's not like you have a family to fill those bedrooms." There it was again, the implication that because I was single, my needs were less important, that my home was somehow less mine because I didn't have children to fill it. "My personal life is none of your business," I said coldly, "and my property is not your safety net." "So what are we supposed to do?" Scott demanded. "Live on the street? You have 2 months before you have to be out of mom and dad's. Find jobs, save for a security deposit, and rent an apartment like everyone else does." "Apartments in good school districts are expensive," Tiffany complained. "Then look in a different district. Apply for assistance, get second jobs, do whatever it takes, like I did when I wanted a home." As I drove home from that tense meeting, my phone kept buzzing with texts from relatives. Word had spread through the family about my selfishness. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my housing obligations to my brother. "Family sticks together," wrote my Aunt Janet. "Your nephew and niece need stability," texted my Uncle Dave. The worst came from my grandmother. "I'm so disappointed in you. Your grandfather would be heartbroken to see how you've turned out." I pulled over, unable to see through my tears. How had I become the villain in this story? When did working hard and protecting what was mine become a character flaw? That evening, I called my favorite aunt, Martha, my father's sister who had always been straightforward with me. "I need to understand what's happening," I said after explaining the situation. "Why does everyone think I owe Scott and Tiffany my home?" Aunt Martha sighed heavily. "Oh, honey, there's a lot you don't know. Scott and Tiffany are in serious financial trouble. They've maxed out multiple credit cards. They've been borrowing from everyone in the family. They even took out a high-interest loan to cover some gambling debts Scott racked up." My stomach dropped. Gambling? Online sports betting. He thought he could win enough to pay off their other debts. It just made everything worse. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Your parents wanted to protect you from it. And they were embarrassed. They've been bailing him out for years. And now they expect me to bail him out too," I said bitterly. "They see your duplex as the perfect solution. Scott and Tiffany living rent, free, would let them finally get ahead. And being near you means your parents could still help with the kids without having them underfoot. So I'm not just giving up my home. I'm also expected to help parent my brother's children." "No one's saying it's fair," Aunt Martha conceded, "but family is complicated." After we hung up, I checked social media and discovered something that made my blood boil. Tiffany had been posting photos of both units of my duplex for weeks. "Our new home," one caption read. Another showed a floor plan with furniture placement. "Just a few renovations and it will be perfect for our family." The most recent post included pictures of my bedroom, my private space, master suite soon to be transformed, thinking gray and lavender for a calming retreat from the kids. She had been inside my home, taking pictures of my personal space while I was at work, planning to take over my carefully created sanctuary. It was one violation too many. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I needed time to think, to plan. I sat on my back porch with a legal pad, listing options and their consequences. Part of me wanted to cave, to give in to family pressure and avoid the conflict. But a stronger part knew this was a turning point. If I surrendered now, the demands would never end. My phone rang. It was Carol, my soon-to-be former tenant. "Aletta, there's something you should know," she said, her voice tense. "Your brother is here again, with a moving truck." "What?" I stood up, knocking over my coffee. "I'll be right there." I threw on clothes and rushed across the backyard to the other unit. Sure enough, a rental truck was parked in the driveway, and Scott was directing 2 men carrying a sofa toward Carol's door. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, blocking their path. Scott looked startled to see me. "You're supposed to be at work, and you're supposed to not be breaking into my property." "Put that down," I told the movers. "This is a private residence." "Lady, we got hired to move furniture," one of the men said. "We don't want no trouble." "There won't be any trouble if you put that down and leave. This man has no authority to move anything into this building." Scott stepped between us. "Alita, be reasonable. Carol's moving out anyway. We're just getting a head start. Carol's lease isn't up for another 30 days. And even then, you have no right to move in here." "Mom and Dad said it was handled," he insisted. "Well, they lied to you. Again." I turned to the movers. "I'm sorry you got caught in the middle of this, but I'm the legal owner of this property, and I'm telling you that you do not have permission to enter." The men set down the sofa on the lawn and looked uncertainly at Scott. "Show her the paperwork," Tiffany called from inside the moving truck. She climbed down, Jackson and Emma trailing behind her. "What paperwork?" I asked. Scott pulled a wrinkled document from his back pocket and thrust it at me. It was a crudely drafted agreement stating that I, Alita Lawson, granted permission for Scott and Tiffany Lawson to take residence at 451 Maple Street effective immediately. At the bottom was a signature. My signature. Except it wasn't. Someone had forged my name in a childish approximation of my handwriting. "This is fake," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I never signed this." "Mom said you did," Scott replied, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Do you really think a handwritten note would override property laws? Do you think I'm stupid?" I was shouting now, past caring who heard. "This is criminal, Scott. Forgery, breaking and entering." "Fraud. We're family," he said weakly. "Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't break into homes. Family doesn't steal." Tiffany stepped forward, Emma clutching her leg. "Think of your niece and nephew, Aletta. Where are they supposed to go?" "Don't you dare use your children as emotional blackmail," I snapped. "If you cared about their stability, you wouldn't have quit your jobs before securing housing." I heard a car pull up and turned to see my parents hurrying toward us. Great, the cavalry had arrived. "What's going on?" my father demanded. "Scott called and said you were causing a scene." "I'm causing a scene?" "He's trying to break into my property with a forged document claiming I approved it." My mother grabbed my arm, pulling me aside. "Lower your voice. The neighbors are watching." "Good. Let them watch. Let them see what kind of family I'm dealing with." "Aletta, please." My mother's voice broke. "We're trying to keep this family together. By destroying my life? By taking everything I've worked for?" "It's just property," my father said dismissively. Something snapped inside me. "Just property? It's my home, my investment, my future. I worked 80-hour weeks for years to afford it. I went without vacations, without new clothes, without a social life. I earned every brick, every shingle, every floorboard. And you want to hand it over to Scott because he can't be bothered to work for his own home?" "Your brother has struggled," my mother began. "No," I cut her off. "Scott hasn't struggled. He's been coddled. There's a difference." "How dare you?" my father growled. "After all we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me lately, Dad? Given away my inheritance? Forged my signature? Tried to steal my home?" From the corner of my eye, I saw a locksmith van pull up. A man in uniform approached, tools in hand. "What is this now?" I demanded. Tiffany had the decency to look embarrassed. "We hired him to change the locks." "We thought you'd be at work. and we could surprise you with the move being done when you got home." I laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Surprise! We stole your house." The locksmith looked uncomfortable. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm the legal owner of this property, and I did not authorize any lock changes." "I have the work order right here," he said, pulling out a form. "Signed by Scott and Tiffany Lawson, property owners." "They are not the owners. I am. Aletta Lawson. Here's my ID and property deed." I always kept digital copies of important documents on my phone, a habit that was paying off now. The locksmith reviewed them, then nodded. "I'm sorry for the confusion. I won't be able to complete this job without proper authorization." As he returned to his van, Scott turned on me, his face red with anger. "You're ruining everything. We've been planning this for over a year." "A year?" I repeated, stunned. "You've been plotting to take my home for a year?" "We waited until you finished all the renovations," Tiffany added, as if that made it better, "so everything would be perfect when we moved in." "How thoughtful," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You waited until I did all the work before you tried to steal the results." "It's not stealing when it's family," my father insisted. "It's exactly stealing," I countered, "and I've had enough. Everyone needs to leave my property now, or I'm calling the police." Scott scoffed. "You wouldn't dare." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Watch me." "She's actually doing it," Tiffany gasped. "Hang up that phone," my father ordered. I turned away, speaking clearly to the dispatcher. "I need assistance with trespassers attempting to move into my property without permission. They've brought a moving truck and tried to change my locks." My mother grabbed for the phone. "Aletta, stop this madness." I stepped back. "They're becoming aggressive now. Please send someone quickly." After giving my address, I ended the call and faced my family. "The police are on their way. I suggest you start loading your furniture back into the truck." "You'd really call the cops on your own family?" Scott asked, incredulous. "You'd really try to steal from your own sister?" I countered. A tense silence fell over the group. The movers, clearly wanting no part of this drama, began loading the sofa back into the truck without being asked. "This isn't over," my father warned. "It is for today." I stood my ground, though inside I was shaking. My mother started to cry, heavy sobs that she made no attempt to hide from the gathering neighbors. "What are we supposed to do now? Where will Scott's family go?" "That's not my problem," I said, though a pang of guilt hit me at her tears. "They're adults. They can figure it out." "You don't understand," she wailed. "We've spent our retirement helping them. We've remortgaged the house. We have nowhere to go either." That stopped me cold. "What are you talking about?" "Your father and I are broke," she admitted. "We've been paying Scott and Tiffany's debts for years. Credit cards, car payments, medical bills when the kids were born, everything." I looked at my father for confirmation. His defeated expression said it all. "So this wasn't just about housing Scott's family," I said slowly as understanding dawned. "You were planning to move in too." "We thought you wouldn't mind," my father said weakly, "since you're always working anyway." In that moment, standing in my front yard surrounded by neighbors and a half-loaded moving truck, I realized the full extent of my family's entitlement. They hadn't seen me as a person with my own needs and dreams. They'd seen me as a resource to be exploited, a solution to problems of their own making. "I've worked for everything I have," I said quietly. "Everything, and I expect others to do the same." "Your brother's different," my mother began. "No," Scott interrupted, surprising us all. "She's right. I've been letting you guys bail me out for too long. This has gone too far." For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the brother I'd once looked up to, before years of enabling had turned him into someone I barely recognized. 2 police cruisers pulled up, and officers approached cautiously. I stepped forward to explain the situation, property documents in hand. Scott and my father spoke with the other officer, voices low. "We'll need everyone to disperse," the officer finally announced. "The owner has asked you to leave the property, and you need to comply." "The owner?" my father sputtered. "We're her parents." "Irrelevant to property law, sir," the officer replied calmly. "Please return to your vehicle." As my family reluctantly prepared to leave, Tiffany approached me, Emma in her arms. "You've destroyed this family," she hissed. "I hope you're happy in your big empty house all alone." The words were meant to wound, but they washed over me without effect. I was done being manipulated. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who see me as nothing but what they can take from me, I replied. As the moving truck in my parents' car pulled away, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. I had stood my ground. I had protected what was mine, but at what cost to my family relationships? One of the officers approached me. "Ma'am, your family member dropped this." He handed me a small notebook. It was my mother's address book. As I flipped it open to find her information, a loose page fell out. It was a list of family members with notes beside each name. Janet told her Aletta promised Duplex to Scott years ago. We'll call to pressure her. Dave, remind him Aletta owes us for college. Have him mention the children's stability. Martha, do not call. Too close to Alita. Grandma, tell her Alita is breaking family apart. Use guilt. They had been systematically lying to the entire family about the situation, explaining why everyone seemed to think this arrangement was already agreed upon. They had orchestrated a campaign of manipulation, using every emotional lever they could find. The final betrayal. 2 days later, I sat in Jenna's law office, the family address book, and forged document on the desk between us. "This is serious," she said, examining the forgery. "This goes beyond family drama into criminal territory." I know. I rubbed my temples, fighting another stress headache. But I don't want to press charges if I can avoid it. They're still my family. Family or not, they tried to steal your property through fraud. Jenna leaned forward. Alita, I need you to understand how close you came to a legal nightmare. If they had managed to establish residency, even without your permission, evicting them could have taken months. So what do I recommend? First, a formal cease and desist letter to all parties involved. Then, a restraining order if necessary. And you need to inform your mortgage company about the attempted fraud, just in case they try to claim any ownership interest in the future. The legal mechanisms felt cold, impersonal. But so had my family's actions. And Carol's unit? I asked. She's moving out at the end of the month. I'm losing that income. Start advertising immediately. Screen tenants thoroughly. And consider a property management company to handle it, at least temporarily. Put some professional distance between you and the situation. I nodded, taking notes. What about their claim that I promised the property to Scott? Verbal promises about real estate aren't enforceable in this state anyway, but we'll address that directly in the letter. They have no claim, morally or legally. As we finished the meeting, Jenna gave me a sympathetic look. How are you holding up? Honestly, I feel like I'm grieving, like I've lost my family. You haven't lost them. The relationship is just changing. You're establishing necessary boundaries. Boundaries. The word my father had scoffed at. It doesn't feel that way. It feels like they'll never forgive me for not giving them what they wanted. That's the thing about boundaries, Jenna said gently. People who aren't used to them often react badly at first. But if the relationship is worth saving, they'll eventually adjust. I wasn't sure my family would adjust. The calls and texts had stopped entirely after the police intervention. The silence felt both peaceful and ominous. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. My brother Scott stood on my front porch, alone, hands shoved in his pockets. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual bravado. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. We sat awkwardly in my living room, the room Tiffany had planned to transform for her children. "I came to apologize," Scott began. "What we tried to do was wrong. All of it, the key, the forged document, the moving truck, everything." I waited, not making it easier for him. "I've spent my whole life taking the easy way out," he continued. "When things get tough, Mom and Dad always step in. I never had to face consequences. And now?" I prompted when he fell silent. "And now I've ruined my parents financially. I've put my wife and kids in an impossible position, and I've damaged my relationship with my sister, maybe beyond repair." His eyes met mine, sincere for the first time in years. "I'm sorry, Alita. Truly sorry." The apology was unexpected, and I found myself softening despite my resolve to stay firm. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "Tiffany's furious. She says I didn't fight hard enough for the duplex. She's talking about taking the kids to her mother's in Florida. And you? I need to find a job. a real one that I won't quit when it gets hard. I need to learn how to stand on my own feet. He looked around the room, taking in the home I'd created. I need to learn how to build something for myself like you did. It's not easy, I warned him. I worked 3 jobs for years, sacrificed everything. I know, and I never appreciated that. I was jealous, if I'm being honest. You made it look so effortless. I laughed, a genuine sound for the first time in weeks. Trust me, it wasn't effortless. I'm starting to understand that. He hesitated, then asked, "Is there any chance you'd be willing to help me figure this out?" "Not with money or housing," he added quickly. "Just advice, guidance. You're good at adulting. I never learned how." The admission of vulnerability from my usually overconfident brother touched me. "I can try," I offered cautiously. "But Scott, there have to be boundaries." To my surprise, he nodded. "I get that now. I really do." As he was leaving, he turned at the door. "One more thing you should know. The whole plan. It wasn't just about housing. Mom and Dad wanted us all under one roof so they could sell their house. They're underwater on the mortgage after taking out so many loans to help us. They're facing foreclosure." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Why didn't they just tell me? Ask for help directly? Pride, I guess. And they didn't want you to know how bad things had gotten with my finances. They were protecting me. Again, he shook his head. Always protecting me from consequences instead of letting me face them and grow up. After Scott left, I sat alone in my living room, processing everything. My family had tried to use me as a solution to problems they'd created and hidden from me. Instead of asking for help openly, they'd attempted to manipulate and deceive. Yet beneath my anger, I felt a flicker of compassion. They were desperate, frightened people making terrible decisions out of fear. It didn't excuse their actions, but it helped me understand them. The next day, I called a financial advisor and made an appointment. I couldn't solve all my family's problems, but perhaps I could help them find a sustainable path forward. One that didn't involve taking what was mine, but rather helping them create their own stability. It would be a long road back to trust. Some relationships might never fully recover. But as I looked around the home I'd fought so hard to create and protect, I knew I'd made the right choice in standing my ground. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. Over the next month, my life settled into a new rhythm. With Carol moved out, I found a new tenant, a young doctor doing his residency at the nearby hospital who was thrilled with the location and willing to sign a 2-year lease. The rental income was secure again, easing my financial anxiety. I installed better security cameras and changed all the locks, including adding deadbolts that couldn't be opened from the outside. The legal paperwork Jenna prepared had been delivered to my family members, formally notifying them that they had no right to access my property without explicit permission. The family silence continued, though Aunt Martha called occasionally with updates. Scott and Tiffany had separated, she told me. Tiffany had taken the children to her mother's in Florida temporarily, while Scott was sleeping on friends' couches, looking for work and a place to live. My parents were meeting with bankruptcy attorneys, facing the reality of their financial situation. "They blame you," Martha said bluntly during one call. "They say you destroyed the family by not helping when they needed it." "I would have helped if they'd asked honestly," I replied. "Instead, they tried to take what was mine." "I know, honey. They can't see it yet." Grief clouds perspective. "Grief?" I repeated. "Yes, grief. They're grieving the loss of their retirement security, the loss of their grandchildren nearby, the loss of the easy solution they thought they had." I hadn't thought of it that way, but it made sense. I was grieving too, in my way. The loss of the family I thought I had. The parents I believed would protect me, not exploit me. "Will they ever understand?" I asked. "Maybe. Given time and distance, people can surprise you." That proved true when Scott called a few weeks later. "I got a job," he announced without preamble. "Full. Time at the community college. Maintenance staff. Not glamorous, but steady with benefits." "That's great," I said, genuinely pleased. "How's it going?" "Hard," he admitted. "I'm not used to physical work all day. But it feels good to earn a paycheck, to pay my own way." "And housing?" "That's actually why I'm calling. I found a studio apartment. It's small, but all I need right now. But they want first and last month's rent plus security deposit." I don't have enough saved yet. My guard went up instantly. Here it comes, I thought. The ask. I was wondering, Scott continued, if you knew about any programs that might help. Loan assistance or something? The apartment manager mentioned some options, but I don't know where to start. The request caught me off guard. Not for money, but for information. A step in the right direction. Actually, yes. I've been researching housing programs. After the family crisis began, I'd started volunteering with a financial literacy program at my local community center. There's a first-time renter assistance fund that might work for you, and a match savings program if you can put away a little each month. That would be amazing. Could you send me the details? We talked for nearly an hour about rental applications and budgeting and building credit. For the first time in our adult lives, it felt like a conversation between equals, not the responsible sister and the perpetual child. How are Mom and Dad? I finally asked. Scott sighed, struggling. The house is definitely going into foreclosure. They're looking at apartments but finding it hard to adjust to the idea. Dad's talking about getting a night security job to supplement his pension. And they're still angry with me? Yes, he said honestly, but I think it's changing. When I told Mom about the job in apartment hunting, she said I was becoming independent like Aletta. It wasn't said with resentment. A small olive branch, perhaps. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Meanwhile, my own life was expanding beyond the family drama. The financial literacy volunteer work had introduced me to a community of like-minded individuals. I joined a homeowners association committee focused on affordable housing initiatives. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my years of working multiple jobs and then dealing with family chaos. One of those friends, Marcus, invited me to a workshop on property investment. You're already a landlord, he pointed out. Why not learn more about building on that success? The workshop opened my eyes to possibilities I hadn't considered. There was a first-time landlord grant available in my county for property improvements that increased energy efficiency. With the grant, I could upgrade the rental unit's heating and insulation, increasing its value while reducing utility costs for my tenant. I threw myself into the application process, gathering quotes from contractors and completing the paperwork. When the approval came through, I felt a surge of pride. This was mine, something I'd built through my own initiative and effort. The day the contractors started work on the rental unit, I received an unexpected text from Scott. Can we talk? In person? We met at the same coffee shop as before, but the atmosphere was entirely different. Scott looked better somehow, less burdened despite his circumstances. I have something to tell you, he began. Tiffany and I are getting divorced. I'm sorry, I said automatically, though I wasn't entirely surprised. Don't be. It's been a long time coming. We married young for the wrong reasons. She wanted someone to take care of her. I wanted to prove I could be responsible, even though I wasn't ready. He stirred his coffee thoughtfully. When the duplex plan fell through, she said I failed her. That if I were a real man, I would have fought harder to take what my family deserved. Take what you deserved, I repeated. Not earn it. Exactly. And suddenly I saw clearly what our relationship had always been built on. Taking, not building. He looked up at me. I don't want to live that way anymore. So what happens now? Divorce. Shared custody of the kids. I'm saving every penny from the new job for a security deposit on a 2-bedroom place, so the children will have somewhere to stay when they're with me. That sounds like a solid plan. There's more, he hesitated. I told Mom and Dad they need to apologize to you, that what they tried to do was wrong, and they need to acknowledge it. I nearly choked on my tea. How did that go over? About as well as you'd expect, Dad stormed out, Mom cried. But I think it landed eventually. He reached across the table. Alita, I don't expect you to forgive them right away, or maybe ever. But I want you to know that I'm trying to break the pattern, to be the kind of brother you deserve, not the one you've had. The sincerity in his voice brought unexpected tears to my eyes. That means a lot, Scott. It's the least I can do. You stood your ground when it would have been easier to give in. You showed me what real strength looks like. As we parted, I felt a weight lifting. The future of my family relationships was uncertain, but for the first time, I felt hopeful that something healthier might emerge from the ashes of the old dynamic. That hope was tested the following week when my mother called, asking if she could visit. I agreed with trepidation, setting clear boundaries about the length and purpose of the meeting. She arrived looking older somehow, the stress of recent months etched on her face. We sat stiffly in my living room, the scene of so many confrontations. "Your home looks lovely," she said awkwardly. "You've done wonderful things with it." "Thank you." I waited, not making this easy for her. "I owe you an apology," she finally said, the words seeming to cost her. "What we tried to do was wrong. We should have respected your ownership of this property." It was a start, but the phrasing still bothered me. "It's not just about the property, Mom. It's about respect for me as a person, for my work, my choices, my right to determine my own life." She nodded slowly. "I understand that now. Or I'm trying to." She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit from childhood. "We always saw you as the strong one, the one who could handle anything, who didn't need our help or protection. So, you focused all your support on Scott instead." "Yes, and in doing so, we failed you both. We made him dependent, and we took you for granted." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I'm so sorry, Aletta, for everything. For the inheritance, the lies, the manipulation, all of it." The apology felt genuine, if overdue. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "He's not ready yet," she admitted. "His pride is still too wounded. But he'll get there." "And what about you and Dad?" Scott mentioned foreclosure. She nodded, wiping away tears. "The house goes to auction next month. We've found a small apartment we can afford on your father's pension if he takes that night job. It's not what we planned for our retirement, but we'll manage." For a moment, I considered offering financial help, but I knew that would only reinforce the old patterns. Instead, I said, "I volunteer with a financial counseling program at the community center. They have special services for seniors. Would you be interested in that?" She looked surprised, then thoughtful. "Yes, I think we would. Thank you." It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a step toward a new kind of relationship, one built on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation. As she was leaving, my mother paused at the door. "You know, I'm proud of you, Aletta. I should have said that more often." "For the duplex?" I asked. "For knowing your worth. For not letting anyone take that from you. Even us." After she left, I stood in my doorway, looking at the home I'd fought so hard to keep. The journey had been painful, but necessary. In protecting my property, I'd also protected something more valuable: myself, respect, and the possibility of healthier family relationships built on genuine care rather than exploitation. The duplex still stood, both units intact and under my control. But the true victory wasn't in the property itself. It was in the boundaries I'd established and the new understanding that was slowly, tentatively beginning to grow in their place. 6 months later, I stood in my backyard, surrounded by friends and a few family members, celebrating the completion of the energy efficiency upgrades on both units of my duplex. Solar panels gleamed on the roof, new energy, efficient windows sparkled in the sunlight, and the landscaping I'd planted in the spring had flourished into a small garden. To Alita, Marcus raised his glass in a toast. Homeowner, landlord, and now green energy advocate. Everyone cheered, and I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. Public recognition still made me uncomfortable, but I was learning to accept it gracefully. My tenant, Dr. James Walker, had become a friend, as well as a reliable rent payer. He'd brought several of his hospital colleagues to the gathering, all of them impressed with the property improvements and asking about my experience with the grant program. "You should do a workshop on this," suggested his friend Sarah, an administrator at the hospital. "Many of our staff would love to know more about first-time home buying and improvement grants." "I'm actually working on something like that with the community center," I admitted. "A series on financial independence for women." The idea had grown out of my volunteer work. So many women, I'd discovered, stayed in unhealthy relationships or family situations because they lacked the financial knowledge or resources to leave. My own experience had shown me the importance of economic self-sufficiency, and I wanted to share those lessons. Across the yard, I spotted my brother Scott playing with his children. After 3 months in his new job, he'd saved enough for a small 2-bedroom apartment where Jackson and Emma stayed with him every other weekend. Watching him interact with them now, I saw a different kind of father emerging, one who taught independence and responsibility rather than entitlement. My parents hadn't attended the gathering. Our relationship remained fragile, limited to occasional phone calls and careful conversations that avoided sensitive topics. But they had attended 2 sessions at the Financial Counseling Center and were slowly rebuilding their lives in their small apartment. My father had eventually offered his own gruff apology, more acknowledgement than contrition, but it was progress nonetheless. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Aunt Martha pulled me aside. "I have some news," she said quietly. "Tiffany's been asking about you." Tiffany? Really? After the divorce was finalized, I'd assumed I'd never hear from my former sister, in law again. She saw the article about your financial literacy program in the local paper. She's been taking some classes herself in Florida, trying to stand on her own feet for the first time. "Good for her," I said, meaning it sincerely. "She wanted me to ask if you'd be willing to talk to her. Give her some advice. She's thinking about moving back to the area, getting a fresh start." I hesitated, remembering Tiffany's entitlement, her cruel comments, her role in the scheme to take my property. "She's changed," Martha added, reading my expression. The divorce was a wake-up call for her, too. She realized she'd been taught the same lessons as Scott, that taking was easier than earning. "I'll think about it," I promised. After the last guest departed, I sat alone on my back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. So much had changed in 6 months, both externally and within myself. Externally, my property had increased in value with the green energy improvements. I'd started a small consulting business advising first-time homebuyers on grants and assistance programs, bringing in additional income. I'd expanded my social circle through volunteer work and community involvement. But the internal changes were more profound. I'd learned to set boundaries without guilt, to recognize manipulation and stand firm against it, to value my own needs as much as those of others. Most importantly, I discovered that true family support wasn't about taking or giving blindly. It was about respecting each other's independence while offering guidance and encouragement. It was helping others build their own foundations rather than expecting to live on yours. The following week, I received a call from an unfamiliar Florida number. "Aletta?" Tiffany's voice was hesitant, lacking its former confidence. "Thanks for taking my call. Aunt Martha said you might be willing to talk." "I have a few minutes," I said cautiously. "I want to apologize," she began. "For everything. The Duplex scheme, the things I said to you, all of it. What brought this on?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. "Reality," she said with a small laugh. "When I moved back to my mom's, I thought she'd take care of everything like your parents did for Scott, but she refused. Said it was time I learned to support myself. That must have been difficult. Terrifying at first. I'd never paid my own bills or managed a budget, but then I took this financial literacy class at the community college, and something clicked." She paused. "I saw your name in an article they shared, about your program back there. It made me realize how much I could learn from you, if you'd be willing to share." The request seemed genuine, without the entitlement that had characterized our previous interactions. "I'm thinking of moving back," she continued. "Not to live with family or depend on anyone, but to start fresh, get a job, find an apartment I can afford. Show my kids that mom can stand on her own feet." That sounds like a positive step. "Would you," she hesitated, "would you be willing to meet for coffee when I visit next month? Just to talk. Share some resources, maybe. I'd understand if you said no." I thought about it, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. Yes, I decided, I'd be willing to do that. After we hung up, I reflected on how much had changed. The woman who had once demanded renovations to my master bedroom was now asking humbly for advice on financial independence. It was a transformation I wouldn't have thought possible a year ago. That evening, I received a surprise visit from Scott and the children. They'd made a homemade card, decorated with glitter and childish drawings, thanking me for being a good aunt. "We've been talking about gratitude in my support group," Scott explained as the kids played in the yard. "About acknowledging the people who've made a positive difference, even in difficult circumstances." "Support group?" He nodded. "Financial Recovery Anonymous. It's like AA, but for people who've destroyed their finances. Lots of focus on taking responsibility and making amends." "That's great, Scott. Really. It's helping. I'm learning to live within my means for the first time. He looked around at my home. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I still feel envious of what you've built here. But now it motivates me to work toward my own goals instead of trying to take shortcuts. As we sat watching the children play, Scott asked about my latest projects. I told him about the workshop series, the consulting business, my plans to apply for another grant to add rainwater collection systems. You always were the smart one, he said with a smile that held admiration instead of resentment. I should have been learning from you all along instead of competing. It's never too late to start, I reminded him. Later that night, I reflected on the journey of the past year. What had begun as a crisis, my family's attempt to take my duplex, had transformed into an opportunity for growth and change. By standing firm in my boundaries, I'd not only protected my property, but had inadvertently created space for everyone to develop in healthier ways. My parents were learning financial responsibility in their 70s, adjusting to a simpler lifestyle with growing dignity. Scott was discovering the satisfaction of earning his way and being a more present father. Even Tiffany was finding her independence. As for me, I'd expanded beyond the role of responsible daughter and sister into a community advocate, business owner, and mentor. I'd discovered that protecting what was mine didn't make me selfish, it made me strong. And that strength, properly channeled, could help lift others without diminishing myself. The duplex still stood as the physical manifestation of my hard work and perseverance. But its true value lay in the lessons it had taught us all, that we each deserve the dignity of creating our own success. That true support means empowering others, not enabling dependence. That family relationships must be built on respect for individual boundaries. Most importantly, I'd learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Sometimes the hardest word to say is also the most powerful. No. No to exploitation. No to guilt manipulation. No to sacrificing your dreams for those who aren't willing to work for their own. Because when you value yourself enough to protect what you've built, you set an example that ripples outward, challenging others to build something worthy of protection too. Have you ever had to stand firm against family pressure to protect something important to you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If you found value in my journey, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more authentic stories of resilience, and share with someone who might need encouragement to hold their boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, protecting what you've worked for isn't selfish, it's self-respect.